You are, in your own right, an expert, I would say, on Arnhem. I mean, you've crossed swords with the best of them. We've had Anthony Beaver on the podcast saying it was all disastrous from the start. It would never have worked. The whole thing was a joke. Where do you stand on that controversy?
If they'd gone a week earlier, I think we'd be looking at a very different story with that operational plan, right? If they'd gone just a week earlier, because the Germans were still on the hop a week earlier, and there's a week's coagulation in certainly in the German command structures. There's a very interesting book of essays that John Buckley has edited about Arnhem. It was in the last couple of years, and one of the essays is called "A Week Too Soon?" And then there's the other thing is there's the controversy over the airlift plan, and was that what the army wanted or what the Air Force? Yeah. And the thing is there's an RAF historian who's since gone through all that, a guy called Seb Ritchie, who's since gone through the actual genesis of the airlift plan, and what's very interesting about it is the army asked for that airlift plan. They say they want that what went wrong in Normandy is what went wrong in Sicily is the drops were scattered. What went wrong in Normandy is the drops were scattered. Could we just all land in the same place together just this once, please? And the Air Force give them exactly what they want. And then, of course, after the event, the army blame it all on the Air Force. They wouldn't let us land where we wanted to. But that's not really what happened. And Ritchie also looks into one of the intelligence myths, which is the overflights. And because he's an RAF historian, and he's obviously thought, enough's enough. So he's gone through all the RAF reconnaissance logs for overflights, where they take picture of Panzer SS units around Arnhem. He cannot find a single flight that matches that description. He cannot find the photographs that matches these. Not to say it didn't happen, but there's no record of those flights that Urquhart, the intelligence officer, claims to have ordered happening. So that's quite interesting. And again, that's the RAF going, because he's an RAF historian, and they've copped all the literal and metaphorical flack around the Arnhem op. So he's just going, hang on a minute, let's just actually look at these things. And that's really interesting. I think Beaver's probably right. But I think it's not the conception that's the problem with Arnhem. It's the realization, the actualization. If they decided that a staggered lift was a bad idea, and that what you do is the assets you land on D-Day at Arnhem, the air landing brigade and the parachute brigade, if you decide they're both going for the bridge rather than half of them having to stay behind and defend landing zones because of your second stage lift, you've got more chance of getting more people to the bridge, which is what it's all about. So I think that there's still miles to go with what you can say about Arnhem. I think it's not settled.
That's clear. I also, whenever I read military history, I think the best and the most trivial, but also the best expression is victory has 1,000 fathers, defeat is an orphan.
Yeah.
And Arnhem now, everybody can tell you what an absolute But I mean, Manstein or Rundstedt's thrust through the Ardennes that reached the coast, Guderian in charge, crossing that. It was an extraordinarily risky. And talk about one single MSR and all that. And yet it's hailed as the greatest victory. It's the most brilliant piece of military operation.
But to which I would say the thing that precedes Arnhem is the greatest ever armoured breakout, which is the breakout after Falaise. And the decision, I think the problem with Arnhem is exactly as you say. We look at it now. It's obviously never going to work. If you're making that decision in late August,
when the Germans seem to
when the Germans when they are done for, as far as you can tell, you've destroyed them in the west, and you're doing. I can't remember which division it does. 90 miles. Does 90 miles in a day. So no wonder you're thinking, well, this is just going to keep going. And from September 1939 on the Allied side, there's been this idea that the Germans are going to collapse like a pack of cards any minute, right from the beginning of the Second World War, and that idea is still doing the rounds 5 years later. It shouldn't be a surprise, I think.
Well, and also, that the Soviets are conquering and committing unimaginable brutality in each year. So if you can get to Berlin first, I find that's what's so fascinating about it.
Well, I find it. In the end, I find it a forgivable mistake on Montgomery's part. Although actually, and of course, failure in this instance isn't an orphan. The buck is laid at stops at Montgomery all the time. Although let's be honest, Ike approved it. So if we're gonna look for where the buck stops, it's got to be with Eisenhower. Says okay, go for it. And but this will never end. This will go on forever. And at Chalk Valley at the History Festival, we had a morning of Airborne Forces stuff, and the airborne archivist from the museum in Duxford comes over from the Air Assault Museum and says, "Oh, you must come and have a look at this stuff, because the thing no one likes to talk about is how bad officer relations were within 1st Airborne, how no one was talking to anybody, how there was a Scottish clique and there was a parachute clique and a glider clique, and they were all at each other's throats in the run up to Market Garden. And then, of course, because it's all a terrible disaster, you're not going to write about that. That's not going to get into the history books, because it would look because they fought incredibly gallantly, as we accept, but it would look like you were really you were rubbing their noses in it or adding salt to the wound. So there's still loads more about Arnhem to come out.